This is the first public meeting of the Lynn Harbor Park project, and I'm pleased to begin this new stage of planning and design for us to create a signature waterfront park for the city of Lynn. It's an exciting time in Lynn as we work to implement the Lynn Waterfront Open Space Master Plan and the Waterfront Master Plan, and transform our waterfront into a vibrant, mixed-use neighborhood with greatly enhanced public access and recreational amenities made available for our entire community, the whole city of Lynn. The Lynn Harbor Park has the potential to be a key aspect to carrying out that transformation and become the cornerstone of 60 acres of publicly accessible open space, as was envisioned in the Waterfront Open Space Plan. As many of you know, that there has been significant amount of planning and preparation to get us to this point. In 2019, the city worked with the community and stakeholders to create the Lynn Waterfront Open Space Plan and a revised Waterfront Master Plan. Both of these plans envisioned improved access to the waterfront, connected by a network of open space and path system, the backbone of which include a 30+ acre signature park on the waterfront and a waterfront promenade. These plans inform the creation of the Lynn Municipal Harbor Plan that was subsequently approved by the Secretary of Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. This important step creates the regulatory framework for carrying out the objectives of our waterfront plans and ensuring public access to the waterfront is provided as it was envisioned in those plans, and a very important piece of those plans. I want to thank you all for taking the time to participate in the meeting, to learn about this site, its historic uses, the planning processes that have led to this point, and how the Harbor Park can truly become an amazing community asset, a recreational amenity benefiting the entire community. There will be a lot of information that we're providing during this meeting. However, we look forward to hearing from you at the end of the meeting, and as we see progress through the public engagement process, looking for the public support to help create the creation of this exciting opportunity, this waterfront harbor park. As I said earlier, I think Councilor Hogan and Councilor Walsh are here. If there's any other electeds, you can give a shout out. There's no intended slights. That's all I have at least noticed at this point. But with that, I'd like to now introduce Kurt Gertner for opening remarks and to introduce the project team. Kurt, it's been great working with you over so many different projects, and I want to thank you for being here, and thanks for being for tonight's Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Kurt Gertner, Assistant Secretary with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. We've been pleased to partner with the mayor and city officials in a series of projects related to Lynn and to the waterfront. The mayor just outlined many of the reasons why the Commonwealth has been interested in and excited to partner with the city on these efforts. In addition to that, I also want to say that we look forward to the ongoing public process associated with this and to working with the city and all other stakeholders to realize the results of the design process that we're really kicking off this evening. It is an exciting opportunity to do some transformational work on the Lynn waterfront. And as part of the partnership, the city and state have been jointly paying for the design services of the firm Brown, Richardson & Rowe Landscape Architects. This evening, we have Clarissa Rowe, principal with the firm, Althea Northcross, and David Andrews joining us to provide for the content to facilitate much of the planning exercise we're prepared to begin this evening. So really the idea tonight is to give you, the public, a chance to learn a bit about this site and particularly to provide your input on the future of this waterfront and the harbor park that we are excited to be working on. With that, let me turn it over to Dave Andrews to provide you with some content and begin this evening's meeting. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Mayor McGee and Aaron Clausen. I'm going to share the screen here. So give me 1 second. Give me a quick nod if everybody can see this. All right. So thanks again. We're really excited to finally be back here. It's been a couple of years since we were talking to the city about the open space master plan. that we completed that process in 2019. Again, as Kurt mentioned, we are working with the City of Lynn and the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs for this project. But today we're focusing specifically on the Lynn Harbor Park. So this is the old landfill that's been on the Lynn Harbor Park for many years on the waterfront. Just to get our bearings here, we have the Walmart down here. This is the Linway Mart over here with Hanson Street between them. The Linway is snaking along the top of the site, the old Gorelick Farm site and National Grid's lands to the east here. But as we mentioned, this park came out of the open space master plan process when particularly there was a major landmark park that was a part of the 2010 municipal harbor plan that was done. And that park, as we know and discussed in the open space master plan, was not feasible for a number of different reasons. So we located and we found a new location for this landmark park, and that was the Harbor Park site. It's about a 30-acre area, and that is a subject of what we're talking about today. During that open space master plan, we prepared design guidelines for the whole of the waterfront area, but also specifically for the Harbor Park itself, things like a 20 to 30 foot wide promenade to go through it, flanking either end of the park with like a destination point. So this is about bringing people to the waterfront and having a destination to go to, and then finding ways to activate the whole of the landfill mound and also lower lying areas. We talked about, a lot of the ideas for the park came out of, we did a program of activities plan as part of the open space master plan public engagement process. And the ideas for how people wanted to use this space were things like amphitheaters and performance lawns and the ability to host like large events, but also things like public access and parking. And so we've developed a plan during that stage that we're going to talk about updating as part of this new process. And this was a plan that we provided at that open space master plan stage, which really talked about how do we better connect the downtown and downtown neighborhoods to the waterfront, much of which is cut off by the Linway. And that was a major component of that. So, and now that we're looking at the Lynn Harbor Park, how do these connections, how can we reinforce these connections to make really good public access to the water, to the water's edge? And for the Harbor Park, these four areas are key spots. So this is Marine Boulevard. So bringing people down Marine Boulevard to the eastern or the northeastern edge of the park itself. Really expanding Hanson Street, which I said goes between the Linway Mart and the Walmart. That already goes to the landfill part, the Harbor Park. And we're going to look at too is Harding Street. And currently Harding Street ends at the impound lot. And, are there opportunities to extend Harding Street all the way to this western face of the Harbor Park? And again, hopefully as the open space master plan gets built out over the various parcels on the waterfront, this pedestrian and cycle connection along the water's edge down to the DCR's owned fishing pier will also connect into the park in the future. As I mentioned, these are the outcomes of our public engagement process for the kind of activities people wanted to do on the waterfront. And those were, mainly walking and exercise, but also concerts and cultural events, and the idea of restaurants, cafes, and food options down on the waterfront. And really overall, it was a big point was about public recreation, local programming, and free facilities, including free parking and really in the idea that you can walk freely on public streets down to the park itself. And so those are big ideas that we want to make sure we're carrying through. And so that's sort of where this all came from. And this next step, what it's all about is us trying to introduce this Harbor Park, the specific Harbor Park project to the public, and provide an update on some of the work that actually has been happening to date. And to get a lot of feedback from yourselves as well about how you want to move forward with this. And with the end goal of this particular phase of work that we've been asked to help out on is about coming up with an agreed master plan for the park, specific to the existing site as it is now, And this master plan is what will be used for the design and construction drawings to actually construct the park. And so this is the process that we're undertaking now. I want to use this plan. So this zooms us in to the specific park site. And there's a lot of information I want to go through on this one slide. I should also say that part of this process is we are early in this whole process. And we wanted to make sure that we're talking to the public and getting our ideas at this early stage, but it also means that there are some unknown items that we'll have to address as time goes on. We don't have answers to all the questions, but we want to make sure everybody is engaged in part of the process as we move forward. So as we know, there is a landfill mound. That's what's sort of indicated by these curving lines here. This parcel of land that is highlighted in this white dashed line and green, hatched in green, this piece of land is now owned by what's called Lynn Harbor Park. And that is a company set up by Charter Environmental who purchased the landfill mound from National Grid. And the reason why National Grid sold the property because the cap that was on the old landfill was failing. And so it had to be fixed and updated. And so Charter Environmental has now control of the site, and through their permitting process with the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, they can bring in some additional material and then provide a permanent cap on top of that. But they also have to put what's called a conservation restriction on the landfill mound. And that means after Charter is done capping the landfill, the area can only be used for public recreational purposes. And so that's where we come in, is making sure and working with Charter to make sure that this land will work for this future public park. Charter also since then has acquired some other waterfront parcels, and together will make this large 30-acre area. And this area is going to become the future, as the land that will be used for the future harbor park. We also have looked at, part of our job is to look at all the different constraints that are out there. This is an old site with a lot of old industrial uses. There's some contamination. It is a landfill or a previous landfill. But there are also some remnants of different pieces of land, and we were sort of asked to take a big picture look at this. Like, how do we make the best park that we can? And so we looked at, are there pieces of undeveloped land that might be suitable to bring into the fold of this harbor park? Some of these properties are owned by private owners, and so we don't necessarily have the ability just to take them. But we have mentioned to these owners that these are some ideas that have been floated. There's no agreements in place, but we think there are some opportunities here to help really make this a fantastic park. I also want to talk about this coastal edge. This is the harbor down here, and we'll see some pictures in a bit. But if you've ever been down there, the whole coastal edge is eroding, and it's eroded about 150 feet in some places into the park site. So we're going to need to fix this whole coastal edge as part of this park project. We also have some other regulatory things like a designated port area or DPA. And a DPA is a regulatory boundary that determines the kind of uses that can happen within it. And so and for a DPA, it only allows marine industrial uses. So this is things like a commercial fishing port or fish processing plants, or maybe transportation related to those marine industrial fishing uses. But what's not allowed are things like landfills, public parks, trails, things like that. And so there's a little bit of a conflict there. So the city recently asked CZM, which is the Coastal Zone Management Agency, to review the boundaries of the DPA. And there's a very clear process that they have to go through to determine if there'll be any changes to the DPA boundary. If they determine that the land here is still suitable for marine industrial uses, they may choose to keep the boundary as it is. They may also take into account that there's a conservation restriction put on the landfill, which may mean that they might amend the landfill around that. So this is a process that will play out over the next, say, about 6 months. And so we're going to be adapting our park design to suit what comes out of this DPA review process. So I do want to, so what we're doing now is we're going to take, to remind ourselves that our real goal here is to make a fantastic public park. And we've worked on other landfill parks in the state, this being Spectacle Island. And it's a fantastic transformation of a really steep landfill site into a major public asset. And these are some of the goals and aspirations we'll be having as part of this Lynn Harbor Park. We also, there are other landfill parks in the state and beyond. Spectacle Island, as I just showed you that picture of, it's maybe a bit more related to Lynn Harbor Park than some of the other commonly referred to landfill parks in the state, because it's right on the water's edge, and it's has the same, it has similar weather patterns and and more natural character that we may find suitable for this Lynn Harbor Park. There's other parks like Millennium Park in West Roxbury and Danahy Park in Cambridge. These are quite large sites as well, but oftentimes they have a lot more mown grass and singular trees because there's less soil built into, less soil on top of the landfill itself. So I'm gonna take a quick little technical drawing. This is like a slice right through a landfill. And what you see is on the bottom is all the landfill material. And then there's a big cap, like a plastic liner that goes over that and that protects that landfill material. But above that is what happens above that is what determines the kind of plants and how many trees and the kind of uses you can do in the park itself. And so we're really going to be pushing for a really deep soil layer. This is what allows us to get really good tree cover. Some of those other parks that have just lawns, often they just have a very thin layer of soil to allow just kind of, grass lawns. So this will come into play as we get further through the design process about how much soil is there and what kind of uses we want to have on top of the landfill mound. And the next thing is sort of take a pause and remind ourselves of the history of this whole waterfront site. This is a plan we showed actually back in the open space master plan process. And this is like an 1829 plan. And you can really see how the coastline of Lynn was far more organic and bended. There was marshland all through here, and there was coves. And the city itself was a little bit closer to the water's edge. This white line is our landfill park site. And the orange line is actually what really is the true boundaries, estimated boundaries of the old landfill that was there. So zooming ahead in time, 100 plus years later to 1938, that whole landfill had been filled in. And so, but we see the Lynnway is in, the shape's there, the railway line's in there, but much of this waterfront zone has yet to be developed, except primarily for, there was Lynn Gas and Electric, they had a plant here, and there's a lot of waste material from this industrial use that was deposited on some of these waterfront parcels. There was also the drive-in theater as well as sort of the first waterfront use in this area over here. Fast forwarding time into the 70s, this whole site in orange this is a municipal landfill in the city of Lynn. So all sorts of material being brought here, especially there was a lot of fire debris from different fires that happened in the city. Much of it was brought to this site as well. In time, the landfill itself was closed, but additional material was brought illegally to the site and deposited here, even though the landfill itself was closed. So what happened was then in the late 80s, the site was prepared for the Lynn Water and Sewer site, which is there now. And that material that was deposited here was shifted over, and it formed that old landfill mound that we will all recognize out there before charter got to site. And apparently the smells were horrible for a number of years during this process. But then fast forwarding into the 90s, we see the Lynn Water and Sewer facility there. They have a mound associated with some coal ash deposits. And here they then capped the mound itself that they had shifted over. During the time of our open space master plan, this landfill the cap had failed. And that is what brought in Charter's environmental work, which I mentioned in the beginning. And so that sort of brings us back to where we are now. But these old historical uses affect the ground on our site and also on the adjacent land parcels. And I want to take a little minute just to show you a few pictures of what the site looks like now. So we'll look at, and I also mentioned how we're looking at opportunities for new uses and potential pieces of land around the edge of the park to help make a better shape and space for the park. And so we'll look at some pictures on the west here, the southwest side. We'll look at the coastal edge. I also want to have a picture here to look at this backside where there is no public access now, but where we're trying to bring public access down to. And then we'll see some pictures from on top of the landfill mound. So this is that first one looking sort of northeast. This is before Charter got to site, but it really shows this has been a leftover site. There's been trash dumped here and collected here over the number of years. And we're really looking to fundamentally transform these spaces. This is the coastal edge. Back in 1938, this was filled all the way up to this last row of piles. This was all solid land. It has now since eroded over time. But this is the space that we're trying to now transform, repair this coastal edge, and make into a really accessible, wonderful public park. This is again on the backside, on the land side of the landfill. And this was taken recently in the past, say, 6 months. There's power lines back here, but there's no public access. And this is what we're talking about bringing people down to and transforming this face of the park and making this a major public face. Now we're on top of the mound here, looking kind of northwest. You can see over the Lynn Water and Sewer site. You can see the hills in the distance. You can see the Linway is actually right here in front of the storage unit building. This is looking a bit more north, but you can see downtown. There's opportunities for some screening, but there are all these amazing views looking out due to the height that we're up at. This is a view looking towards the Nahant Causeway. And so again, you have a much different perspective of this part of the city from these elevations. And also looking at some of the lower areas that become usable park space. And finally, a view back looking southwest, the city of Boston skylines in the distance, the rest of the Broad Sound and Harbor, and again, these lower lying areas that are suitable for great park use. So to sort of refocus ourselves, this is that plan I showed you a minute ago. And this is where, this is sort of where the fun parts begin for us, is that we've been working to figure out all these different pieces and some of the constraints. And now we're trying to find what are our opportunities to make this into an exciting public park. And so we took those earlier suggestions and ideas about how to activate this public park, and we updated the plan. The plan we have is not going to be the plan that gets built, because what we're here today is
porque estamos aquí para hablar cómo mejorarlo, qué otros
and we're going to
usos
morph and change.
tienen, les gusta, podemos cambiar para poder desarrollar un acuerdo.
There are some site constraints, though, that limit, how big or what kind of area we can work in. And so that's part of this, us having a better.
Esto es parte de que nosotros tengamos un mejor acuerdo de lo que está allá afuera, poder diseñar un parque de acuerdo a sus ideas.
Take a second to orient yourselves, but this is a hand-drawn master plan of some ideas about updating this harbor park. I'll walk you through a couple key points, and then we'll go into specific areas. The first thing is we have here's the mound, right? This is a stone edge that Charter has to provide to protect the landfill mound from storms. We're talking about providing access, though, at all sides of this mound in order to get up over it and cross it, and also then to capitalize on the views that are up there. I do want to say that I've drawn in some buildings that aren't there, and I can't say that's what these private landowners are going to propose for there. But the main point that we're trying to suggest is there's excellent opportunities to provide public access down to the landfill park itself. And that is the major thing that we're trying to communicate, is there's a great chance here to provide these access points. And these uses they will be determined by those landowners if they choose to. So they could be commercial uses, they could stay as is, they could be residential. That is sort of out of our scope, but we're really trying to make sure and make suggestions for how to bring this public access to the park. We also looked at this western end, capitalizing on the existing roads that already go there. Marine Boulevard coming down the Riley Way, how do we activate this eastern end and repairing all this coastal edge? I do want to remind people about the DPA boundary. So this will come into play based upon the outcomes of the DPA boundary review process, and we may find that there are parts of this park that stay within the DPA, and we have to work around that. And that's sort of just part of the creative design challenge that we'll have as part of this process. So I'm going to take a little zoom in to what is the Western Plaza over here. So again, to orient ourselves, here's a bit of the Walmart building. This is Hanson Street running down, and currently it ends about here. This over here is the actual landfill mound itself. And if we can capitalize on some of these, I showed you a picture of the area that was collecting trash. If we can capitalize on some of these lower lying areas, we can really transform this into, an awesome destination with things like a visitor center and a cafe, large scale playgrounds, public parking, bus and drop off areas, passive lawns to use or performance areas. We also have a repaired coastal edge. There's a lot of contaminants in some of the sediment that's in the harbor. And so we're looking at opportunities at the higher levels, but maybe it's a naturalized beach, for example, that happens above, on top of this coastal edge. There's also chances for, water jets and splash pads. And so these are kind of the ideas that came out of the old plan, and now we're trying to incorporate into the new plan. And these are some sort of, pictures to, to sort of trigger those ideas. We're sort of in an urban plaza, maybe the splash pad takes on a bit more, a form like this. This lower picture, this is the idea maybe of, sand areas, almost beach areas on top of the coastal edge, but, tying into our promenade. This lower right picture, as we get, this is a really large park, and there's a lot of more, manicured areas potentially, but also some more naturalized areas. And particularly as we get close to the coastal edge, the planting might be, take on a lot more naturalized, more native planting, a little bit more wilder feel. But we still want to carve out some spaces that feel clean and inviting, to relax and enjoy in. Next, we'll look at what is the sort of landfill zone. This is the actual mound portion of the site. So we'll zoom into that a little bit. Again, it's about connections. So, we looked at, is there a way to capitalize on this little corner of land, which currently is outside of the park's ownership, but we're looking, is there a chance to use some of that land to help us get an accessible path to snake up the slope, and really bring us to these amazing overlooks at the top. Then working in paths that go down to all parts of this front side, water side of the landfill part of the mound itself. Along the top, there isn't a huge flat area on top, but there is potential room for things like, sculpture parks or picnic areas and other, viewpoints, other ways to really enjoy what it's like to be on top of this at this elevation. We also have chance for, this could be, instead of accessible paths, it could be like bike trails and BMX paths that traverse their way down the slope. These are potential uses we can explore. And we're really going to try to work in really dense tree planting where we can, either to shield views and to screen views, or to provide habitat as well. This will also has a great chance to be fantastic sledding hill in some form, if we can work it in. And so some of these pictures, which I was getting a sense of, is, meadow planting, paths snaking down the front of the landfill, overlooks, alternative trails and paths and opportunities for sort of larger scale public art, might be something that would be suitable. Now we'll zoom into this waterfront zone. This is that whole stretch along the water's edge. And here, I'll show you a section in a minute, but what we have here is, this is the stone on the bottom of the landfill mound itself. This is then a kind of flatter area. before we get to the coastal edge. So we're talking about, as I mentioned, repairing the coastal edge and carrying through this major waterfront promenade through this space and connecting all of the waterfront. There could be central lawns to hang out, could be dense woodland planting. There's some opportunities for wetlands, some of which has to do with collecting the runoff from the actual surface from the landfill. This is not landfill water, this is surface water going through grass, will be collected here. So there's opportunities for more natural areas and then more manicured areas as well. And then this really active coastal edge itself with maybe overlooks that you can walk out on. Here's some other ideas that we've considered. This is a section. So for those, it's sometimes hard to read. It's basically like taking a slice through the landfill itself, this whole waterfront area. So here we see the landfill mound coming down with paths snaking their way up. We also have this guy over here is the existing wall that was built back in the 1930s to hold, when they filled in this area. But since then, it's eroded. And one idea is if we're repairing this coastal edge, we need to consider rising tides and increased storm surges that are bringing more water more frequently at higher elevations. And so we may consider raising the height of what our coastal edge is. We may also consider, because the park now is within the floodplain, meaning it's subject to getting flooded quite often, we can maybe consider raising the elevation of that to match up with our new higher coastal edge. And so all of these ideas have permitting, we have to go through a permitting process to have them approved. But these are some of the ideas that we're trying to bring together. So it's looking at some of our constraints, like an eroded coastal edge and being in a floodplain, and trying to say, well, actually, is there a chance here to raise this and make this actually quite a usable and engaging park tied into a revised coastal edge? So these are some of the ideas that we've been considering. And again, these are some of the pictures. You can imagine, like I said, a more mown lawn area adjacent to a more naturalized edge with opportunities for overlooks. We'll be repairing the coastal edge, and they could take different shapes and different forms and materials that we would use. We're going to be asked by the state to really consider, softer materials, things like sand and boulders and planting areas, as opposed to too much hardened edges. And so we're really going to work through that process to determine what is the appropriate solution for the site itself. So the edge design will be a whole sort of design process that we'll have to go through. But as we move down the waterfront, there are chances for wooded areas, more open areas. There's a lot of things that we can do along this edge. Finally, we'll look at this eastern park. Notice it is kind of on an angle. So the next slide, we're going to turn it a little bit. And that is, so we've turned it now to help it fit the page a bit easier at the same size as the other drawings. But here we have Marine Boulevard coming down, and we have the edge of the landfill around here. And so we're trying to find ways to activate this whole side of the landfill park. We are showing things like, one of the ideas is to use really active uses like ball courts and performance lawns and playgrounds as a way to provide a destination on this side of the park. We've shown things like futsal courts and pickleball courts and basketball courts. It's more to demonstrate there may be some opportunities for these active uses, and we would love to know more about the kinds of uses you want to have and the kinds of courts that would be suitable. Those are some of the things that we're really looking for some feedback on. But again, it could be like cafes and restrooms and other playgrounds that we can really, it's a place to come down to at different times in the day. Those are kind of the uses we've been thinking about. And these are some pictures sort of reinforcing that, how do we get overlooks over the water at which is a lower elevation? How do we work with some of that steep landform and build into it to get these great views? Large scale natural playgrounds, performance areas, and again, places to come and sit and relax and enjoy some food if you want to, or use the park itself. So we've had a chance to go through all these different pieces, and I just want to reiterate, as we said at the beginning, this is more like an introduction to the work that we've been doing. We're trying to understand some of the constraints that are out there and come up with ideas for these opportunities for how we can really capitalize on them. There are some issues, like I mentioned, the DPA boundary review process. We'll be responding to the outcomes of that. And we really want to get your feedback on how you want to use and access and enjoy this public park, and also any questions you might have. And again, there'll be questions and we may not have all the answers, and part of this initial stage is really just to bring you along in this process and get you up to speed. Can I, sorry, I didn't see you talking there. Can I just finish up with one piece, and then we're going to turn it over to a question and answer period? Is that okay? Apologies there, sorry. Just wanted to say that, so this is our first meeting, right? And the next thing we're going to do is have 2 site walks, or 2 slots for a site walk. So on Saturday, October 16th at 2:30, we would love people to come to the landfill site and walk through the area so you can see it for yourself. We're going to have a second time slot on Tuesday, October 19th at 2:30. We're going to share a link on the next page and on the project website for how to sign up for these site walks. Following them, we'll have a second public meeting at some point in November, and there'll be a final meeting at a date to be determined. This is the project's website. It's called lynincommon.com/Harbor Park. You've probably been here if you signed up for this meeting, so you'll have access to that. And finally, at that website, and here we're going to here's your link for signing up for these site walks. We're also going to issue a survey just to really get your feedback and ideas on today's talk and anything else that comes to mind related to this Harbor Park, any questions you might have. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Aaron. Because this is being translated in Spanish and English, there's a bit of process to posing your questions. So Aaron, I'm going to hand it back to you if I can.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for that presentation and a lot of great information and a lot of information to take in, I'm sure. So just briefly, as we move into the Q&A portion of this, if you could just raise your hand so that we can take one person at a time to allow the interpreter to translate or interpret the discussion in Spanish. So the first person I want to bring up is Cash, if you want to put your question or comment. So Cash, if I can interrupt just briefly, I think what you're going to have to do is the bottom of the screen. If you can select the interpreter button, it's in the shape of a globe, and then select English so everybody can hear you. I think we're still having trouble with you coming in. If we can come back to you in a second, Cash. I see that.
So you can't hear me? You can't
there
hear
you
me
go.
right now?
Now I can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. So I was just asking whether this was a wish or an inspirational project or is actually happening. And if it is happening, how's it being paid for? And the follow-up to that question would be public safety. Is it a goal to put a fire station in this neighborhood? As this neighborhood is growing, we bring in park, we have multiple residential project in this neighborhood. How are we mitigating that? The public safety side of things.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cash.
So I can take part of that question, I think. So this phase of the project is to develop a master plan, and which is a paid for project. The next phase is to develop the design and construction drawings. The funding for this project and the Waterfront Edge is not fully in hand. It's a significant project that the city and state are planning to undertake, but it is the full intention to progress this project. In terms of public safety, I think in terms of fire department locations, I would have to hand that back to maybe Aaron or others in the city to answer.
I can take that just briefly. I think as far as this site goes, there's a couple of regulatory elements that are playing a pretty critical role in deciding how this property moves forward in terms of land use. So as Dave had alluded to earlier in the meeting, the concept of turning this into a signature waterfront park has come out of past planning efforts, starting with the municipal harbor plan that was completed originally back in, I think it was 2007, around that time frame.
Right.
And so this park is replacing the concept that was originally closer to Market Street towards downtown. So there's a responsibility to assure and ensure that this land becomes a public park or open space. The extent to which it's designed to serve that purpose is the topic of conversation right now. So much of the property could not be used for a fire station. But I think, it's a good point. As the waterfront gets redeveloped, we need to consider all of these impacts and the needs in terms of infrastructure, traffic, and then of course, public health and fire and safety. So that's something that we'll need to consider as a community going forward. However, this site is pretty much identified as a public park, an open space.
So Aaron, just
And
final
there-
thing. So that means this project might not actually happen. So if Mayor McGee's leaving this year, so a new mayor comes in, and this might not be a priority. It might be something else, right? So this project might not actually happen. Again, it's been around for the past 7 years, right? So, actually since 2007. So it may not happen. Correct?
Well, there's no guarantees at this point. I think what I would say to that is that there has been pretty substantial and consistent move to put the city in a position to facilitate and create a public park. Part of that's the planning work that's gone into place, the municipal harbor plan that was adopted this past year. And then the kind of the status of the landfill itself going into private ownership, moving through this process to closure and repair of a cap that requires some preparation for open space. So I think there are elements, there are variables that are aligning to put us in a good position, but we still need to, as a community, actively and aggressively work forward because it is a big project. So
Aaron,
I
if I
wanted
could.
to turn to Rep. Capano. Do you want to pose your question?
Yes.
Like it could be exciting, it'd be nice to have, a place like that the community can enjoy. Yeah. The only thing is, and I'm sure you thought of this, and maybe I missed the beginning. Maybe it was mentioned at the beginning. As part of the plan, as it goes on and moves from conceptual plan to an actual plan, with input from everyone, like I know you are planning, is part of what has to be on there is, the Linway divides, the rest of the city from the waterfront, as and I know there are plans, ongoing and for Blossom Street to be opened up to the Blossom Street extension. But down on that end, there's been talk of a footbridge, and, there just has to be part of the plan. Something has to be incorporated in that makes it easier to facilitate people from the neighborhoods to be able to get over there and enjoy it. There's a possibility of the bike path, that may be able to make it over to the other side, maybe going under the bridge, through the gear plant. And like I said, a drawbridge has been talked about, but whatever it is, and even if it's down the road and, this thing is pieced together over a number of years, I think part of the plan, should definitely incorporate a way to make sure the community has easier access to whatever, this becomes. It's like I said, I think it's an exciting opportunity, for open space, possible performance center. It would be really nice, but I just wanted to hear if you had put any thought into that yet. And, just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks. Thank you.
Sure. I can take a stab to start. Aaron, you might want to follow because there is a group looking at the Linway itself for the Department of Conservation and Recreation, who owns the Linway. There's a study being done. We're not up to date on the outcomes of that or the process or the time frame of that, but they are looking at how do you cross the Linway safely? How do you reconfigure? Are there reconfigurations to the lanes? Better public transportation along it. So I think in those crossings are a key part of that study. And that was a real, real thing we talked about in the open space management was like this, making the whole waterfront more accessible and a success really does hinge on being able to get over the Linway safely. And so for our scope on this, that's, we don't quite have control of what happens on the Linway itself, but I do know that this study is happening, and it's something that's being looked at.
Kurt, I just wanted to, I'm sorry, Clarissa, go ahead.
No, and Peter, you're completely right. And I think Kurt is here from the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, and Aaron, I think, was about to say the same thing. And maybe he could talk about those connections because they're key, as you know. They're really important, and nothing succeeds on the waterfront without those connections.
Yeah, so speaking to that, I think both Clarissa and Dave have already addressed much of what I would have said. The getting people, the citizens of Lynn, to their park on the waterfront, very important. And the Linway, as it presently exists, is a barrier to doing that. And very much going to work with staff at the Department of Conservation and Recreation as they look at the Linway, reconsider it, to find ways to make it much easier and safer to get from north of the Linway to the new public park and promenade. And I do want to briefly address the prior question about the park and the reality of this. The executive office has worked now, of course, with Mayor McGee, but also with his predecessor, and we look to work with his successor on the parks on the waterfront as well. And have been looking at this as a partnership between the city and the state. Of course, this mayor has been very important to that, but we would look to work with Mayor McGee's successor on parks and open space on the waterfront. We know already that this is not going to be an inexpensive park, and we are yet at the table working with the city to sort this out. So leave it at that.
Thank you, Kurt. Rep. Capano, is there anything else you wanted to add, or before we move to the next? Okay.
He's muted, sorry.
Okay. So I think you may be not on the English channel. Jonathan, you want to pose your question, make a comment?
It looks like Pete's just muted, actually. If you wanted to finish up your point first, Pete.
I want to thank you for doing this and getting the ball rolling for this. This is an exciting opportunity for the city. If we can get this up, and we will be following up with DCR and trying to help out whenever we can. So thank you. That's it. I don't have anything else.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Aaron. First off, I just want to second Pete's thanks for this update. It's great to see progress from the last meetings when we could actually be in person. But also want to say thank you to the counselors from Ward 6 and 7 who are here. I know this is y'all's neighborhood. Great to see you here and paying attention. I've got some additional concerns about access here. If we can keep on this slide about the project context. What I'm seeing here is a park that is bordered by either what is now luxury developments or what will soon be luxury developments and industrial sites. I see a park that is likely going to be very beautiful for the people who can use it, but without any kind of restrictions on access from abutting property owners and without significant work done to really create access there. I mean, how often do you go to a park that's behind a bunch of storage tanks? You know, I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Riverfront Park in I believe Chelsea, that's right next to the salt pile, but it's not exactly an attractive place to go with your family, you know? Granted, Lynn definitely needs more green space. We definitely need more family amenities. I really appreciate the focus on that. But I'm really genuinely concerned that this is just going to be a park for wealthy people when we were promised a park in a different location that was since turned into condos for wealthy people. So I would love to hear if there are any other kinds of restrictions on what abutting property owners can do. If Chapter 90, which ensures waterfront access, applies here at all. You know, Pete already touched on pedestrian access, but there's also the issue of parking. We already can't park at the North Shore Community College lot, which is currently the only real access point to cross the Linway with any kind of safety. And I know even that footbridge is not seen as particularly safe, considering there's no visibility or lighting on it. So yeah, I would just love to hear some of your thoughts around how you're going to address those issues to keep this a park that is for the residents of Lynn now, and not just for newcomers with this mythical expendable income that the city keeps hoping they're going to bring in. Thank you.
Thanks, John. As you know, like, we did the open space master plan. You were a big part of that process, and we really went through in detail during that time about, you know, the old park that was promised, you know, and yeah, it wasn't delivered because, as we said, then there was road configuration issues. We weren't involved in it, but there was road configuration issues that didn't work. A decision was made not to go forward with it. But when we picked up on the open space master plan process, you know, we're picking it up from that spot in time. And I think we worked through it, sort of tried to accept, you know, you know, what we have to work with. And, you know, this is a major site on your waterfront, and it can be used for little else. And so the reason why collectively, as part of the open space master plan process, we selected this site because it had amazing opportunity. We don't control the boundaries of this site, but we have a 30-acre piece of land potentially to work with to make a, you know, one-of-a-kind park on the waterfront. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we know from our conversations, and we know from what we just, you know, have been talking about today, and this plan is trying to show, is there are some connections there now, and public streets with, you know, wide sidewalks and bike paths are the way we make people feel like it's their right and they're welcome to come down to these spaces. And we also think there's new opportunities for those. And that's why we did the master plan to start. And that's why we're trying to continue some of those ideas for this. And so some are new opportunities that we're pushing. Say, hey, you carve out this space, you know, get this public access to the western face of the landfill park. And so, you know, those are the ways we provide real public access, and there's parking locations to get to, and free activities and free land to go, you know, to recreate and to enjoy. So we're really trying to do that. The land parcels that are there, we don't get to control what landowners do on them. That's the city's zoning, you know, and review process of what can be built there. What we can do, though, is really push, and I think, you know, this is more for the city, that when those developments do come on board, you know, having them, you know, work towards achieving the goals that are set out in the open space master plan and in this now updated version of this public park plan. And so that's another tool that's there. And I think, you know, putting pressure on that to really push that public access is how that will come to be. So that's sort of my initial reaction to that.
I think just a brief follow-up there, Dave. I appreciate the comments, John. I think the design approach that Dave walked through is really seeking to make the park more porous, meaning more accessible from different vantage points, And some of that is going to take partnership with, some of the abutting property owners. But at the very least, we know along Hanson Street, there's a robust connection that's required under Chapter 91 and emphasized in the municipal harbor plan. There's parking that's already there. That's a requirement under the Chapter 91 license behind the Walmart. The design that they presented introduces additional public parking to that. And then on the north side, specifically looking at ways we can kind of work in access and additional parking. But it's a point well taken. It's a challenge in kind of deciding and talking through trade-offs, because many of those spaces that could be enhanced or switched over to public parking removes park space, those flatter areas. So so those are some of the trade-offs we'll be working through. But it's a very good point that I think the design team and we're really trying to work through. I did before I wanted to put it over to Councilor Walsh. If anybody is looking to comment or ask a question, please be sure to select the raise hand button so I'm sure to see you. If you're raising your hand physically, I won't be able to see you. So if you can do that, I would appreciate it. Councilor Walsh, if you want to pose your question, make a comment.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody here too. I spent a good better part of my life on the waterfront here in Lynn, and always wondered why we never had any public access. I think there's something lacking in the city. It's our connection to the waterfront, being a waterfront community. And I've had the fortunate opportunity to go over to Spectacle Island, and I asked people that are on here to take a look at that and research the job that was done by Spectacle. There's a lot of similarities between this. It's a landfill in the water. Spectacle was a landfill up until about the 30s, if I remember. Clarissa will probably tell me if I'm wrong, but she was a big part of that job. And being there and seeing that and seeing what's possible with something like that is something that's really driving me to encourage this park. The big difference is Spectacle is an island. And when you have a city like Lynn and you have this opportunity on our waterfront to really solidify some sort of true public access, and seeing what can be achieved with those landfills, I think this is something that we really have to strive for. I think the access for residents all around Lynn is going to be really important. I hear what Jonathan's saying, it's difficult to try to park and try to find places to get there. And I think those are all things that need to be, adjusted in the plan to try to represent that we mean that it means everybody, right? So I see this as a tremendous opportunity, and I see it as a need even after COVID. We see recreational space at a premium in the city, and how do we improve on that? And I think this is one of those things that we're gonna be able to do if we do it together. I just want to say we're very fortunate to have Brown, Richardson and Rowe, who was also the big architect firm that pretty much did all of Spectacle Island, and the engineering behind that and how it looks. And I've had an opportunity to take some of the councils out there. It's really what we're shooting for. So everybody has that opportunity to be on the waterfront. And I just want to thank you all and just say that I'm a big supporter of this, and I really want to see this come together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Colin, if you don't mind, if I jump to Councilor Hogan, give him a chance to see his hands up here, and we'll come back to you in just a moment. Councilor Hogan, you want to go ahead?
Jay has said we have to get this thing done, and we have to keep moving it forward. And it's a big thing with the local government and the state to get this thing to happen. But speaking to my constituents, one of the main things is access to it. And if we could ever get the bike path across the Linway, I think that would be something truly amazing, just to get more access to it, so then the people of Ward 6 who abut the property can get over there to it. And like I said, so we're not just making this for somebody else, we're making it for the residents of Lynn that are here now. And that's the people that I represent. And I tell them about these things that we're working on, and I'm so excited to bring these things to them. But we have to be able to get access for them to get across the Linway to enjoy these new things that we're planning. And I just want to thank everyone here for keeping this going. And Aaron, we've been in a lot of meetings about this, and we're going to continue to meet about this. And the biggest thing is for us to make it happen, and not for people to be negative on this thing. And we're just going to keep working hard as a whole team, as a city, as a state, and we're going to make this thing happen. I just want to thank everybody that's involved tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Colin, if you're still here, please
I am.
tell us what you're
Yes.
thinking. All right, thanks.
Thanks everyone for doing this. One of the questions I had was Broad Sound is an amazing opportunity for water-based recreation, whether it be paddleboarding, a sailing dock, whatever it may be, access around the corner to the Saugus River area. And I didn't see any of this in the discussion. I wanted to know if there are restrictions associated with that, what they are, and if not, is this something that would be also considered to be incorporated into this plan? Thank you.
I guess to start, in the open space master plan, we really did lay out some, the kinds of use, some things you're mentioning, to occur on the water sheet, which is on the water itself, in the harbor and the sound. There's, because of this DPA boundary line and the landfill, the old master plan had, the 2007, 2010 master plan had a private marina here. Some of those uses you can't actually construct. But that's not to say there aren't these opportunities to bring people onto the water itself. The Blossom Street, there's a boat ramp, there's other private marinas, further into the harbor. In our review of the design of this park itself, a boat ramp or a launching point didn't seem feasible, given particularly probably two issues. One, we do have some concern with the sediment, the potential contaminants in the harbor sediments at the bottom. So bringing people down into the water there was a concern. And also the elevational change that we're looking at for rates in the coastal edge up to, say, a good 6 feet higher than it's at now, that might prevent some access issues there. Not to say these things really shouldn't be considered. I don't know if the park itself was the best spot for a launching point, but I think if there are ways that the city can provide more access and more activities that people can do on the waterfront, it will be certainly something that's going to benefit everyone. So it's sort of my half answer in the sense that it hasn't been included in this plan now, but it's something we can take a closer look at.
So to clarify what you said, that you expressed there were some concerns with the water quality and the sediment quality, in order that we don't necessarily have some concerns about even putting people in the water right in that area. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, that is, we didn't do water tests or sediment tests as part of our project. So I can't tell you that exactly what is there. I am just knowing the industrial uses that were there before, it would be a concern to be asking people to get into the soil, potentially right where some of our site sits.
If I could follow up on that too, I think as far as small craft access, there's the boat launch that is not far up from the site that has a fair amount of parking, and I think it's a matter of kind of balancing what we have on hand to provide access to the water sheet for smaller craft kind of recreational access to the water. I will say, the DPA does, as it stands now, restrict recreational access in the water. Depending on how things change there, that may open up some opportunities for smaller craft. And then as we go forward through the design process and engineering, particularly when it comes to shoreline restoration, we'll get a better sense for what is going on in the soil. And there may, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I do think there may be some opportunities as we move forward to think about much smaller craft access, things like kayaks or, stand-up paddle boards, possibly. But a marina that was depicted in the 2007 plan is just not feasible. That's just not going to happen. I don't think that was ever going to happen. And in the fact that we have a launch so close by, I think looking at some other kind of reuse activities for public benefit is part of the trade-off there. But it's something that we can take back and continue to look into. Gordon, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I add to the chorus of folks who've talked about connectivity. You know, you take your life in your hands crossing the Linway as a pedestrian or as a cyclist, and I think connecting this to the rest of Lynn is just crucial. So I hope there's a real focus on that. Having been on the Northern Strand as recently as Sunday, I echo, I think, what Councillor Hogan said about having the Northern Strand. I think Councillor Walsh said it as well. Connecting that to the park could just be a great idea. I mean, the Northern Strand is already getting used heavily, and it's great to see. But connectivity is just crucial. And that was really the only comment. I love the fact that the city is thinking big about this. I mean, I think this has a capacity or the possibilities of being just wonderful. Aaron has humored me on 2 occasions, and so I've walked the site twice during the summer. The views from the top are spectacular. The possibilities, given the topography there, are just, you know, they're really wonderful. And thank you to all of you who are putting so much time and effort into this.
Thank you, Gordon. Edward, you question or comment?
Yes, hello. I've worked down the harbor, you know, for over 40 years, like Councilor Walsh, pretty much his whole life too. And the commercial fish pier is, in my experience, has pretty much been unusable because of when the southeast wind is coming in, it's blowing there. My suggestion would be to look into a breakwater. And I think a 600-foot breakwater heading at 110 degrees would be enough to stop the southeast wind, make the fish pier usable. But that would also be a walkway where there would be a destination. You could walk out there, it'd be a great spot for the sunset. And it would be a destination to get down to that area, is to walk out on that pier. Like Gloucester has one that's, you know, 0.4 of a mile. If this would be, you know, much smaller than that, but it would, I think that would really improve the whole project, where the fish pier would be usable and it would be a destination to actually walk out on a jetty.
Thank you, Edward. I see Councillor Wash raise your hand. You may be looking to comment on that point. Go ahead.
I just want to add to it. So the reason there's 100 feet of shoreline missing is because of how rough it gets in the front out there. And just with experience of having family boats and things on that commercial pier, even 100-foot boat in the Southwest down there just beats itself to smithereens, if you would. I think the kayaking and recreational part ties in. I think that's why we would try to look at sites further up the river, where it's a little more picturesque and probably a little more safety accessible. Even the corner of the this piece of property, as it goes around almost by the General Edwards Bridge, is a little more protected. And I think if we're looking to recreate in those ways, those are probably the areas that have a little more protection from that weather, because we just don't want to put people in bad situations, especially out front there. If anyone, I've had a lot of time down there, I've spent a lot of time. We were losing about 6 feet of land to storm down there. I'd walk after a storm. And so those are all really valid points. I just wanted to bring that up. I would love to see a breakwater in Lynn Harbor. I'm just not sure if the permitting was going to allow it or not, but something we should, you know, at least entertain and ask those questions, since we've got the ear of some of the people that would probably answer that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And Edward, I don't know, Dave, if you want to talk a little bit about the limits of our scope and ability to include a breakwater into this. I can try to, but you're probably going to be more accurate than I'm going to be.
Now, first of all, we aren't, you know, a coastal engineer, and so the, you know, eventual, the next step of the project I mentioned is design construction drawings, and we'll have to include the coastal edge. So what's happening all along that edge, and so we'll work with other design team members, consultants, to help determine like the best solutions for not only protecting the park spaces, but the landfill itself behind it. And then whatever materials and layout or design of that edge, that's, we have CZM's requirements that are really looking for living shorelines. We have DPA areas that are looking for a vertical bulkhead wall. And so we'll come up with a combination of measures or methods to protect the edge for the park. My sense is that, and for everything that I've, been involved with, once we go out beyond that bulkhead line, it gets really difficult for permitting. Putting objects out in the water is currently outside of our site limits. And I think from my experience with CZM, that isn't something that they're going to be looking for. I will also say that when we do our coastal edge design, we're actually going to be asked to work with the existing line that things have been eroded to. That is establishing the new edge of the water for us, the coastal bank. And so where we're outside the DPA, that new line of erosion is our coastal bank that we can't really go beyond. And so permitting something outside of that is a whole nother chapter. And Clarissa has got her hand up, and I know she's trying to chime in and add on to this. So Clarissa, you're muted, Clarissa. There you go. So
thanks, Dave. I think that I agree with everything Dave said and what Aaron said. This is very complex. One of the things that the city is looking at is trying to dredge a new channel in front of that area. And I think that the Corps is now looking at it. So I think that what we need to do, we're park people and we design parks, but as we've said, the next stage is getting a coastal engineer. We've worked with Foth, which is a great big national engineering firm on the fishing pier, which is being renovated, and also on the Lynn Harbor, State Heritage Park. They're working with us on that too. So the next stage will be to involve them. We'll get more sort of data to really look at what is possible there. But I think what we're trying to do, is focus more on the connections to the city than we are to the water. And I know that's a lost opportunity, but I don't think we can do everything. And I'm really pleased that everybody loves the Northern Strand, because the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has put a lot of money in that Northern Strand. And we're really, really, really pleased with the response. So, just stay tuned. Waterfronts happen over a period of decades, and Spectacle Island happened. I always say my children gave me the white hair on this side, and Spectacle Island gave me the white hair on this side. It takes a while, and all your ideas now in the beginning of this process will be the ideas that we're dealing with for the next 20 years. And so I really thank you.
Yeah, just to follow, thank you, Clarissa, to follow up on that. I think, Edward, your point about wave action there is a good one. And I think what we recognize and what we're really able to deal with in the scope of this project is ensuring that we have a shoreline that's restored, under the regulations that we have to operate within, but minimizes, if not completely stops, erosion that's happening there from a public health perspective around the landfill, but also ensures we're able to preserve some of that open space between the landfill and the water side. And then, for successful that this will be, this is very much the phased approach, as Clarissa alluded to. A waterfront transformation takes decades. And so, this will be a stepping stone, and, there's things that we will be able to build off of. And, hopefully we can find ways to deal with the kind of southwestern, storm surge and wave action. Mayor McGee, I wanted to pass it over to you.
Is there any other? I'd rather defer to anyone else who has questions. If not, I'm happy to weigh in.
I want to say, I think, Kathleen, you may have been raising your hand earlier. Did you have any questions? Or are you still on the call? We may have lost our opportunity to hear from Kathleen.
Am I still
Okay.
here? Am I still unmuted? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. who's
We
it?
can hear you.
Nope, hi, yes. No, I just wanted to say that, no, I think it would help the project that basically now we've got an unusable fish pier, commercial fish pier. That's where the breakwater would come in. I just wanted to let Carissa know I'm not that white yet. I'm getting a little silver there. But I understand it'll take time. So I have hope, you know.
All right. Thanks, Edward. Mayor McGee, I think you can take it away.
Thanks. I think I have the whitest hair on the call, so I'll take that role, I guess. Couple of things that I want to weigh in on. I couldn't agree more on the access points, and I think Jonathan spoke to it, but I think we all feel strongly about it. I know the councilors did, that the access to this is a key piece of this, and the open space, in my opinion, the 60 acres of open space from the open space, waterfront open space plan was the big piece of what's going on our waterfront, creating open space for everyone, making sure that access is real. The reimagining of the Linway is a key piece of this. And as DCR embarks and on another study related to that and reimagining the Linway so that there is a real connection between what used to be a connection, which is the West Lynn side or the, across the Linway from the waterfront, and really integrating back together both the city and the waterfront to allow us to take advantage of this as a community is a key piece of this. So I think the discussions and the public input here tonight will be just as important as we really continue to talk about the DCR proposal and really looking at the Linway, taking it from a speedway to a parkway to a connection between our community and access. That is, it couldn't be more of a point. That is such a barrier to what we want to do for our future. And so creating this park is for our future, and creating the access points along that corridor is a key piece of that. And in addition to the excitement on the Northern Strand, the second phase of the Northern Strand will come along the Common down Market Street to the Linway. And that proposal includes a crossing of the Linway and actually taking a lane of traffic along to the circle as part of that dedicated bike lane. So there is pieces of the puzzle that are a part of this, but the access points, the Northern Strand expansion, and maybe a connection down Lawson Street as that project's happening next week to and up towards Marine Boulevard to allow that access as Representative Capano talked about. I just want to make those points because they are a piece of this, to create a signature generational wonderful park that nobody can get to is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about creating something special for our community, for our whole community, and for people in the region to come and take an opportunity for it. And that means being able to get there easily on foot, on bike, and by public transit as well as by car.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel like I should just leave it there, but I also feel like I need to speak to this. There's going to be additional opportunities to engage in this process. Dave mentioned this is early, and I know there was some ambiguity to what we're talking about tonight, but we wanted to bring it to the community early and get your initial feedback and just present as we move forward, and at the very least demonstrate some progress. So as Dave mentioned, there's some opportunities to get on the site. Earlier, I put a link in the chat to sign up. You can also go to the city's project page. It's linnoncommon.com/Harbor Park. That link is also on the screen and in the chat. That's a great place to get information and pass documents like the open space waterfront master plan, the updated harbor front master plan, and municipal harbor plan, which all speak to this. That's available on that webpage. And then you can keep posted as we move forward with these. So please stay engaged. Really appreciate you all taking the time to join us tonight, learn about the project, tell us about your interests, what you want to see here, and hope that you are able to stay engaged as we move it forward. So with that, anybody else from the project team want to sign us off, or are we good?
I'm good.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much, and look forward to seeing you at a future date.
Thank you.